I think we're back. But I don't know if it's a new video or not. That's the problem. You still have that stream open.
No, it ended for me. It wouldn't let me go back.
What is happening?
Yeah, this is a new stream.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know. It might erase the first 21 minutes, which sucks, but we'll stream. Like, watching this back is going to be scuffed. If you're watching this back and wondering where is the part where we're talking about uniforms and you can't find it, we already talked about it, but stream lagged out. And honestly, I don't even know if it's like a internet connection thing. I think it might be like I'm using the internet too much, because my call with Eric has been fine this whole time. It's like it's almost like I'm using the internet too much with the stream, and sometimes it just can't handle it or something, and it just completely shuts down. So, yeah. Anyway, Westbury, that doesn't affect anything. That was just a theory. It's no correlation. Because yeah, I don't know if it's like the connection or if it's what's it called, like the amount of data it could handle.
The bandwidth?
Yeah, the bandwidth. I was blanking on that. So, I don't know. Backwards hat hit different. How does it hit, Oscar? Anyway. I guess we're good now, so we'll stream a little bit more and we'll just chill. This guy, all right, we were just about to talk about Scoop B, and then we lagged out. But Scoop B Robinson keeps getting quoted on Twitter, primarily by the Hoop Central, all right? And the type of rumors that keep getting thrown out there, especially today, from this Scoop B guy, is ridiculous, all right? It's cringy bad. But, like, people, like, talk about it as if it's serious. So, according to Scoop B, the Bucks are inquiring about the availability of Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry, and Victor Oladipo. Milwaukee hopes to acquire a high-impact player at the guard position. When part of the way I feel like you can tell if it's like kind of BS from a source is when they name drop like 3 or 4 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, when Woj breaks stuff, it's like the Milwaukee Bucks are in talks with such and such team on such and such player, right? And we know Woj is legit. With Scoop B, it's always like, this team is interested in these 3 or 4 players. Like, I saw something from Scoop B, like, about, like, the Raptors and Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and somebody else. Did you see that one?
It was Jokic, yeah.
And Nikola Jokic, like, yeah, right. And it was, like, some random person tweeting it out and misspelled Kevin, and let me just bring it up for you. So, this guy, man.
I feel like, because the minute the Bucks lost our next stream, we talked about most of those same names: Victor Oladipo, Chris Paul. Who was the other guy?
Kyle Lowry was the other one Milwaukee was interested in. I don't
think we mentioned Lowry, but we mentioned those type of players. So I feel like those guys are just saying like, oh, like, well, it's obvious that the Bucks are going to do this, so I'll just put. My sources are saying they're interested in these guys. Well, no crap, dude. Like, we called that the minute the season was over for them. Like, it's stupid.
Yeah. I mean, like, in this, I don't know who this guy is. He's not. Oh, look at that.
It's an
name.
Abdi from Toronto. That's funny.
That's sus. That's hella sus. What?
I don't think Abdi or People's Mix would like Oregon women's basketball though, but
yeah. Falcons. I don't know. Yeah, that's ironic. But you know, you got Scoop B on here, like, quote tweet. You know, somebody said, according to Scoop B, the Raptors inquiring about availability of Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic. Toronto hopes to acquire a superstar player. He quotes this and just corrects the spelling of Kevin. Like, bro. People actually listen to this guy, and it's like this every offseason. So it's starting to ramp up with, like, rumors. So this guy will continue to throw stuff out there. It'll either be common sense stuff or stuff that, like, you know isn't true. Like, bro, I mean, even if it is true, it's not like even if the Bucks called the Raptors about Kyle Lowry, teams call each other all the time about certain players. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's like legitimate, right? Like Portland can call and acquire about Chris Middleton and like 10 other players, right?
Giannis.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean? Like GMs bring up players to each other all the time. So like some reporters will like report every time a player is brought up in a GM call if they can. You know what I mean? It's not like legit, but they'll make it sound like, oh, the Bucks are inquiring about Kyle Lowry, you know. But in reality, the Bucks and the Raptors GM were probably having maybe a casual conversation, and Milwaukee's GM was like, so would you be considering moving off Kyle Lowry? And the Toronto GM probably was like, not for only for Chris Middleton or Giannis. And the Milwaukee GM was like, no, that's not a good trade. You know what I mean? It's like, that's probably how the conversation goes. But I guess report and just throw it out there. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, this guy's never broken anything before it happens. He's never, like, been a guy that's like, oh, these teams are talking, and then those teams ever even ended up making a trade, really. You know what I mean? Like, it's nothing legit, but this guy gets quoted all the time. And I know a lot of people in here probably follow Hoop Central on Twitter. Just vet the sources and vet where the information is coming from, because, like, me and Eric, we can see through the kind of crap, but I know a lot of people fall for it.
And I just want to say this. So you and I get stuff wrong sometimes too. The CBA is very complex, and it's hard to interpret some of because like the wording is really confusing. And like, you know, we were talking about on the last stream your trade exception free agent idea, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not 100% sure on that. So like, there's things we don't know, but like, it doesn't take a lot of like research to find out if some of these things are possible. And I got this with the Bobby Marks thing. So in case you missed it, he proposed that the Blazers sign and trade for Gordon Hayward. And so now I have all these people telling me, well, like, Bobby Marks is a former front office executive. He would know more than you and stuff like that. It's like, well, okay, yeah, that's probably true, but like that doesn't mean he can't be wrong too. And the thing I don't get is he keeps saying that the league is going to trend towards sign-in trades, but the Gordon Hayward situation, he would have the opt-in or opt-out date is going to be before free agency. So we wouldn't be able to talk to Gordon Hayward according to the rules. And if we do work out a sign-in trade for him, it's going to be obvious that we did discuss it with him afterwards. And so we could get audited and potentially lose draft pick, potentially void that trade per the new rules that they imposed last offseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've corrected like a CBA expert. Oh my God, are we? It's not as bad though, I don't think. It's not as bad. Hopefully it just doesn't like completely just leave us out to dry like before. But
there we go.
Yeah, so I mean that was slight lag, not completely ending. But no, I mean Eric has corrected, I forget his name, but like a CBA expert, cap expert before. And that cap expert has like admitted it. You know what I mean? Who was it?
He had to redo a whole article.
Who was it again?
Name, but yeah.
Was it Zach something or I don't know. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know, dude. Like I would put Eric's knowledge, even my knowledge of the CBA, up against like a Bobby Marks or something like that. You know what I mean? Like we
that's the funny thing, because Bobby Marks was like a GM front office type person at one point, so it's hard to say that I'm above that. But at the same time, he came from an era where it was okay to tamper and do all that stuff, and the NBA is really cracking down on it. And he's basically saying, well, I know it's against the rules, but it's going to happen anyway. But like, I don't know if it will this summer, because like you hear about the teams talking about trading, Milwaukee trying to trade for Victor Oladipo. Like, are they allowed to have that conversation right now and just not make it official? Or like, I don't know the NBA stance on that, but I know with free agency specifically, they were pissed about how all those deals got done basically before free agency even started last year. And a lot of teams felt like that wasn't fair because they played by the rules, and the teams that didn't got rewarded by signing free agents before the time was even allowed for certain teams to talk to them. So like if a Neil Olshey waited till the right time to call a free agent, and he had already signed with someone before the time even started. That's not fair to small market teams, especially. So I think that moving forward, the NBA is going to be really strict about those rules, and I don't want to lose draft picks and stuff like that because we're just even inquiring about a trade like that. And Gordon Hayward is not going to opt out of a $35 million contract to maybe sign a long-term contract somewhere else this summer. Like, that's stupid. Like, even if he had thoughts that he was going to get like a 4-year, $100 million deal, that's still, I mean, you could sign next year like a 3 or 4 year deal for the $65 million difference and still be fine. Like I don't think he needs to get out of that contract to sign a longer one. That doesn't make sense to me.
Also, like, it'd be hard to get him without trading Nurkic. You know what I mean? We'd have to give up, like, even if we did a sign and trade with him. You know what I mean? Well, like, Gordon Hayward is not happening. Gordon Hayward is not happening this offseason. You know what I mean? Here's the problem. You could go back in on this, but here's the problem. Like, people that, like Bobby Marks, who throws out, Blazers should sign and trade for Gordon Hayward. Blazers should sign and trade for him. The problem is, when that stuff gets thrown out and isn't realistic, a lot of fans think it is. They just see Bobby Marks saying that and like, oh, Olshey could go and get Gordon Hayward, you know? It could go and happen. And then when Olshey doesn't go out and get a Gordon Hayward type, they get mad at Olshey, they blame Olshey, and all of a sudden it's like, Olshey sucks, he doesn't get Dame and Stotts, the players they need. Even though it was never possible in the first place for a multitude of reasons that these people that end up criticizing Olshey don't ever even see. That's the problem I have, and that's what we try and that's why we try and educate people, and we talk about it deeply so people truly know what's going on, instead of just like, oh, we can get Gordon Hayward, oh, we didn't get Gordon Hayward, what the hell, Olshey?
I forgot what Twitter handle it was or what site it was that said it hinges on whether Portland wants to trade Zach Collins or not. And I keep thinking, like, Zach makes like less than $6 million. That doesn't even come close to $35 million. So all these people are like responding to that saying, oh, yeah, you for sure trade Zach Collins for Gordon Hayward. Well, no crap, but like you can't, it doesn't work that way. You have to give up like 4 other players to make it work. But see, that's the other thing is that Bobby Marks isn't taking into account that Boston already is in a situation where they don't even think they can draft 3 players in the first round of this draft because they don't have the roster spots for those players. So they can't accept like a 4-for-1 trade for Gordon Hayward this summer because they don't have the spots to do so.
Yeah, why do people even think he's available?
I don't know. Yeah, the only way they're going to trade him is if they get an equally talented player that makes similar money, where they can do like a 1-for-1 type trade, or like move up in the draft or something for taking maybe a slightly worse player.
Yeah, the one guy on our roster that I could see them, other than Dame, that I could see them considering trading Gordon Hayward for would be Jusuf Nurkic. Mm-hmm. Because they kind of need like a big going forward. They have like 3 wings, small forward type guys that play the 2, 3, and 4. On that team, yeah, and Nurkic would fit on that team, and you know, it would provide them more flexibility to because they have 4 legit starters there right now. The thing is, none of them are like a big. None of them are like a power forward center type. So if they could trade one of their wings for a power forward center type, then they could go out and sign a 2 and play Jaylen Brown at the 3 and play Jason Tatum at the 4. They'd have Nurkic at the 5. Or they could go out and get a 4 and play Jaylen Brown at the 2, Jason Tatum at the 3, and their new guy at the 4. Or they could go out and get a 3 and play Jaylen Brown at the 2 and Jason Tatum at the 4. You know what I mean? It provides them a lot of flexibility for adding that 5th legit guy, because right now they only have 4, with one of them being Gordon Hayward. So they would potentially consider trading like Gordon Hayward for a big man on his level, and then that would allow them to fill out their roster in an easier way and balance the roster more. But that's the only type of trade I could see would be for a Jusuf Nurkic. They're not going to trade him for a Trevor Ariza and a young big who hasn't proven himself. You know what I mean? That's not the position they're in.
An interesting thing I thought of would be Hayward for Blake Griffin.
Yeah. Problem is,
maybe
that's not
some draft picks.
Detroit would have to give up draft picks, and at that point, I don't see why they would do it. Yeah. Unless they are that desperate to get off Blake Griffin's contract. And Blake Griffin, if he wasn't injury prone, I'd say yes. But he's so injury prone that I feel like trading Hayward for Griffin straight up would be a mistake.
Yeah, I'm not saying it wouldn't. maybe that Boston could give them their 3 first for the 7th pick or something. Maybe Detroit likes players later on in the draft or something.
Yeah, see, that's the type of team that might value multiple draft picks because their like prospect cupboard is pretty bare and they're in a rebuild. You know, they don't really have many long-term pieces on that roster as is, I feel like. Derrick Rose is not a long-term piece. That will be a guy in... Derrick Rose is probably going to get traded this offseason. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. But, like, Detroit would be interesting. Blake Griffin, that's an interesting scenario.
Caleb says all this spawned from Zach Lowe saying Hayward would be a good fit with the Blazers. And, yeah, that's the problem. I kind of agree with that. I wouldn't mind Hayward at the 3, but, like, when you break it down, there's no realistic way to get Gordon Hayward this offseason. Maybe the following offseason when we might be in a little bit of different situation, he's actually a free agent. Maybe we could sign and trade for him or something. I don't know, work something out. But I don't see any way he's going to opt out of $35 million and then on top of that find a way where we can get to that kind of price. We talk about this all the time. Players making about $25 million are hard enough to trade for, let alone someone making $35 million.
And here's the other part that gets talked about in this conversation. Oh, let's just sign and trade Hassan for him. Boston does not want Hassan Whiteside on a multi-year contract. Hassan Whiteside is not Yusuf Nurkic's level. They would probably have more interest in Collins and Ariza than for Hassan Whiteside. Like, teams don't value Hassan Whiteside. Teams don't value bigs that put up empty stats like they did 5 years ago. There's a reason Andre Drummond literally only got traded for a second-round pick. Andre Drummond and Hassan Whiteside's value is pretty equal. You got Andre Drummond getting traded for a second-round pick. If that happens, why do you think... Let me rephrase this. Drummond got traded for a second-round pick. Why do people think that they can trade Whiteside, who's a free agent, for Gordon Hayward? And why do they think Boston is going to go out and do that? Boston could probably have Hassan Whiteside for the mid-level exception and keep Gordon Hayward.
Mm-hmm.
So why would they go out and trade Gordon Hayward for Hassan Whiteside and overpay Hassan Whiteside? It just doesn't make any logical sense. Anybody that suggests that doesn't make any sense.
We wouldn't, Randall. That's our point. I don't know if you're questioning us.
Oh, we wouldn't. No, we wouldn't trade Nurkic. We wouldn't trade Nurkic for Hayward. I'm not a fan of like lateral moves and reshuffling the roster just to move laterally at the expense of continuity and chemistry and familiarity with each other, especially with a short offseason.
And so one more point about this podcast in particular. So I have these people telling me, well, Bobby Marks said this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, in that same freaking podcast, Zach Lowe says to Bobby Marks, I don't think we're going to see any teams selling their first-round pick this year, and it hasn't happened since 2013. Well, do you know why they haven't sold their pick since 2013? Because they made a rule saying you can't sell first-round picks anymore. So they talked about a rule that can't even a trade not being possible, that can't even happen. So don't tell me that these guys are always right and I don't know what I'm talking about, because they just mentioned a trade that they don't see happening when it can't even happen because you can't trade a first round pick for cash anymore. So
yeah,
it hasn't happened.
I don't know what trade you're necessarily talking about that they discussed, but I knew that was a rule that you can't sell first round picks anymore. And apparently they did.
No, they were talking about how they didn't see. Because like they said in years past, teams sold their first round pick because they didn't want the guaranteed salary on their books, but they didn't see this summer being a situation where any team would sell their first round pick just to get that contract off their book.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't do it anyway. Like, you guys are talking about trades and CBAs. Like, at least look up the rule and figure it out.
I mean, that's a pretty basic rule, too. I'm surprised they didn't know that. But yeah, that's the thing. People talk like those guys are speaking the gospel when it's like, okay, why don't we get any respect? Because we know our CBA, right? Like, this channel's kind of looked at as, oh, they don't like stats, right? And they think they know so much about schemes and stuff like that, which we do. But I feel like the one thing you cannot argue, whether you hate us, love us, despise us, wish our YouTube channel got banned, like, no matter what, no matter how you feel about us, I feel like the one thing you can't deny is that we know the CBA. We 100% know the CBA. So it's always comical when people, like, argue with you on CBA stuff and they have no idea what they're talking about, or they, like, talk about Bobby Marks brought up this idea, so it's possible, like... meanwhile, Bobby Marks is out here on a podcast saying, yeah, I don't talking about stuff that's not possible. It's just funny how everything works.
I think I might have told this story on air before, but so Bobby Marks made a post. This is probably almost a year ago now, but he made a post saying, based on last year's amount of sign and trades, he thinks that's the trend going forward, is that like all these offseason moves are going to be based around sign and trades, and it's just going to become this like common thing. Whereas I think last year was just like complete coincidental. We've gone over this before, like, the Nets sign Kevin Durant, and Golden State's like, oh crap, do they have any free agents? And like, oh, D'Angelo Russell, let's like offer him a max and see if the Nets will do a sign and trade. And it's like, it wasn't necessarily that they were going into the offseason saying, oh, you know what, we're going to try to sign D'Angelo Russell and sign and trade for him. And like the Heat couldn't even have signed Jimmy Butler if they didn't find a team like us to take Whiteside, or like at one point they were going to have to give up Dragic to the Mavericks for nothing, or they were going to have to make some sort of salary dump move to make that happen. I just think it's so hard to pull it off, and it just happened to be a bunch of coincidences. But I DM'd him because his DMs were open, just thinking like maybe he'll answer. So I wanted to know, as a former front office executive, like, do you go into the off season planning on hoping to get guys from sign and trades, or hoping to sign and trade some of your own free agents? Or is that just something that happens organically if it happens to happen? And he responded with, there were a bunch of sign and trades last year with Jimmy Butler and D'Angelo Russell and all that. And I'm like, that wasn't my freaking question. And like, I was like, thank you so much for responding, but like, I was asking more along the lines of your planning and strategy wise going into the off season. And he never responded again. So I was kind of frustrated with that, but I mean, at least he responded once. But like, I just wanted to know, like, as a front office, like how, like Neil O'Shea right now, would he be like thinking like maybe I could get lucky and sign and trade Whiteside to a team, or is it just like a situation where it's like how we think of it and how we've told people to think of it? Like,
the thing is with Whiteside is it. In order for us to be able to sign and trade him somewhere, it's going to take a team wanting him that doesn't have the money to sign him, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is, though, Hassan Whiteside doesn't have much of a free agent market. Most contending teams have a center entrenched that they would rather have than a Hassan Whiteside, right? Rebuilding teams aren't going to want an aging Hassan Whiteside who appears to be a bit on the decline. So what does he fit? He only fits a contending team, but most contending teams don't need him. So the one or two that do, like, we don't even need him because we have Nurkic. So the one or two contending teams that need him is really the only market for Hassan. So he's not going to get paid that much. So those contending teams that really want him, they're going to have free agent money, whether they have cap space, or more likely a mid-level exception. The thing is, if they have the mid-level exception, then why would they sign and trade for him? The only thing I could think is, they want to sign somebody else with the mid-level exception, so they may be willing to like sign and trade, a guy making $5 million a year to sign us on for a $7 million a year contract and maybe a second round pick. For example, maybe the Wizards want like a starting center that rebounds and blocks shots and wants to try and make the playoffs this year. Like, okay, they might go out and sign Hassan Whiteside, be willing to pay him like $8 million a year for the next couple years or whatever. So they offer Ish Smith and a second round pick. Like, that's the best we could get. We're not going to go out and, like, convince Boston to sign him for $20 million a year and then, we can get Hayward back then. It's not going to happen like that.
It'll be like the Layman trade last year.
Like
we don't get crap back.
Think about this. All the big signing trades that happened last year involved, like, a star player switching teams. Kevin Durant going to Brooklyn. Jimmy Butler going to Miami. Kemba Walker going to Boston, right? All of them revolved around like a star player switching teams. Hassan Whiteside just
happened to have a team going to that same team.
Yeah,
except for Layman. Layman wasn't a.
That was just like a fringe roster move.
But we didn't even get anything from it, so it wasn't like we needed anything. They just happened to have an exception that they wanted to trade him into.
Two of those 3 stars to switch teams somebody was going from the team they were going to the team they were coming from. You had Kevin Durant going from Golden State to Brooklyn, and then you had D'Angelo Russell go from Brooklyn to Golden State. So they got signed and traded for each other. You had Kemba Walker going from Charlotte to Boston. You had Terry Rozier going from Boston to Charlotte. So they got signed and traded for each other. You know what I mean? Like, the Brooklyn didn't even have to necessarily sign and trade for Kevin Durant. It was just the fact that
they
like
got a first round pick out of it, actually.
Yeah, you know, the fact that like Golden State wanted D'Angelo Russell back and Brooklyn was going to let him walk anyway, so they were able to get a first round pick. So that's the thing, like that stuff is fluky, right? And we've only seen this level of signing trades for 1 year. So it just screams like that's the outlier to me, especially going into this offseason where you're probably not going to have any star free agents switch teams because there's really no star free agents. Who is the best free agent on the market? Anthony Davis. He's re-signing with the Lakers. If he didn't re-sign with the Lakers somehow, the only thing that would happen is he goes and signs with the Bulls, who have salary cap money, who wouldn't have to sign and trade him. But he's going to re-sign with the Lakers. What other stars do you have on the market this year?
I could maybe see the Clippers trying to sign and trade Harrell, maybe. I don't know. But again, did he play himself out of a above mid-level exception contract possibly in the playoffs? I don't know. So, like, teams might not want to overpay him either. I don't see a lot of teams overpaying this summer.
The thing is, though, I don't see a team that doesn't have cap space, like, really trying to go after Harrell. You know what I mean? Like, what? Maybe Dallas and maybe something like they sign Harrell and sign and trade like Tim Hardaway and a pick to the Clippers, you know, like maybe something like that. But that's the thing. It's like, okay, maybe you can maybe think of one player, right? But it's also like still a long shot for Harrell because like he could easily resign in with the Clippers, or he could easily go sign with a team that has cap space that'll give him more of a role, like a Charlotte Hornets team. Or a team like that wants like a big going forward and think they can maybe turn Montrezl Harrell into an all-star or something. So that's the thing. It's like even with a guy like him, it's not lighting up, or he's just gonna get signed and traded. So that's the thing. I don't expect many sign and trades this year. If there are sign and trades, I don't expect them to be anything like worthwhile. You know what I mean? It'll be like a Jake Layman trade last year. It might be like Hassan, Wizards want Hassan and don't want to use an exception, so we take back Ish Smith in a second in a sign and trade for Hassan or something like that. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like, but people talk about it like, let's just sign and trade Hassan to San Antonio so we can get back Aldridge. It's like, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make sense for a multitude of reasons. So I hate seeing people talk about stuff like that because, and this goes back to what I said earlier, it sets people up to be hating on Olshey in the end by thinking stuff is possible when it's really not.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff you can hate on him for
now. So yeah, I mean, unrealistic expectations going into this offseason are a thing. There's a reason why I'm not like coming up with pipe dream offseason ideas where we're getting a bunch of star players, because there's really no star players available in free agency or on the trade market even. I don't expect many top like 30 players to switch teams. I would say maybe like 2 max. Maybe 3. Like, there's not going to be like how it was last offseason or offseason before that.
And here's the problem. So, in chat, I see Gallinari, Ibaka, Bogdanovich, Malik Beasley, who is in some legal trouble now. Who knows if he'll get something. But Otto Porter Jr. is not a free agent. He has a $28 million contract. He's not going to opt out of that.
Yeah, but, he has a player. He has a player option for next year at $28 million. He's taking that player option and same with those.
So here's the problem. So you look at Sacramento. So let's say Bogdanovich wanted to sign with the Portland Trailblazers for like 3 years, $45 million or something, right? Mm-hmm. So the Sacramento Kings would have to trade him. We'd have to work out a sign and trade, right? Mm-hmm. So then we're talking about the only player that really fits that we would trade for him, because we're not going to trade Nurk for him, is Ariza. And why would Sacramento want Ariza for Bogdanovich? Like, we'd have to throw in draft picks, I guess.
Or you'd have to go and try and find a third team that wants Ariza and might be willing to give up like an expiring and like a couple second-round picks, and then you could give Sacramento those second-round picks.
But then when you're talking sign and trades, it gets really complicated. Like, Miami got really lucky. They were able to work out a 4-team trade just to get enough cap space. But, like, it took the Clippers using like 10 million of their cap space and us using a bit of salary to like take back more than we gave out to for them to even come close to matching or being able to have enough money. So.
Yeah, you basically had Josh Richardson going to Philadelphia. You had Jimmy Butler going to Miami. You had Myers Leonard going to Miami. Maurice Harkless going to the Clippers, and Hassan Whiteside going to the Blazers. Like, it was very complicated. I mean, here's the thing. Like, on the other side of the coin, Olshey needs to get creative at some point. You know what I mean? Like, for missing out on one trade that would have been really hard or impossible to do. Like, I'm not going to get mad at him. In the end, though, his tenure in Portland will be to find out if he can get creative and, like, add that third star, second star, whatever you want to call it. Like, he needs to make a splash at some point. So, like, I get frustrated kind of waiting for that. So I get fans' frustrations. But also, we got to be realistic about what is possible and what is available out there.
Well, see, this always goes back to the Whiteside keeping him at the trade deadline, because you and I both know the whole point of trading him for a contract that had another year on him was to be set up in case someone becomes available. We have the contracts to match.
Yeah.
So, like, let's say Chicago this year just wanted to dump Otto Porter, didn't even care about getting a pick back or anything. They just didn't want to pay him $28 million, and we could give him, like, you know, Ariza and, like, whoever, Tony Snell or whoever we traded in Whiteside for, you know, just something like that. Like, but we can't even do that this summer. But, like, you always have to have a contract, and that's why Olshey said something in 2016 that makes complete sense, but doesn't resonate because all those players ended up, like, not performing well enough to their contract. But he said the year before he had some chances to make trades for some star players. He had assets, but he wasn't able to do it because he couldn't match salary, because we had the lowest salary in the league. We were below the salary floor. All our good players were on rookie deals, like Dame, CJ, all those guys were still on their rookie contracts. So we couldn't trade them for, like, a guy making $25 million because we would have to trade like our whole team just to match. So he said, like, part of the reason for giving those guys the contracts was to have salary to match in trades. So it kind of sucks that all those guys didn't perform well enough to have any value in trades, and they all had negative value. But
then also it's contradictory.
The thinking was that, okay, now I have all these contracts, we have all these salaries, so if I need to make a trade, I can easily take, like, Evan Turner and Myers Leonard and get enough and then throw in first round picks or whatever. Like I said, it didn't manifest into anything, which is the problem. But, like, this offseason is back to that, where we don't have a lot of tradable contracts. And so moving forward, we need to find a way to get tradable contracts onto this roster. So if, like, a Chris Middleton does become available at the trade deadline, we have the assets to trade for him without giving up, like, Nurk or whatever.
And here's the thing. Like, this is why I really wanted an Otto Porter Jr. trade last year. And everybody's talking about, oh, he's injured and whatnot. Like, yeah, but even if he was injured, you know, he would be a guy that we could maybe match salary with for an Aldridge, and, like, San Antonio would bite the bullet. I'm not saying I want Aldridge because I don't really want him, but, like, that's just an example, because 1 year left, okay, San Antonio might be willing to bite the bullet if they're able to get, like, assets back, young assets, picks, whatever, and we can just trade Otto Porter straight up for Hassan White, or for LaMarcus Aldridge, you know? So it would have been trading Hassan Whiteside at the deadline last year for Otto Porter, which would basically make all these trades possible where we're talking about, like, big salary guys, and we wouldn't have to, like, throw in a Hood and throw in a Ariza and throw in all this type of stuff. Like, salary-wise, we would have been in a tough position with the luxury tax, so that's the other issue. But, you know, it's just like you gotta have tradable contracts in the offseason, or it limits your options. And we were saying that at the start of last year. We were saying that because basically now we're in a position where, like, if we didn't even trade for Trevor Ariza, like, Kent Bazemore was going to expire. That's why I like that Trevor Ariza trade, because, like, if we wanted to go out and get a Kelly Oubre, we can trade, you know, and Trevor Ariza's salary matches. You know, that's just a hypothetical example. But we were in a position going into trade, you know, before that Ariza trade, where it's like, okay, if we don't do anything, Bazemore expires, Whiteside expires, then we go into the offseason where literally our salaries look like you got Dame, CJ, Nurkic, right? Our big three. Don't want to trade Nurkic, especially his contract's so good. Don't want to trade Dame. Don't want to trade CJ unless it's like a Chris Middleton type of player, but that's not really available, most likely. So other than that, those guys aren't really trade assets like that we're going to use. Our only contract would have been, our next contract would have been Rodney Hood for $6 million a year, who could honestly opt out of his player option and be a free agent this year. So he might not even be tradable, at least until he accepts his player option. Zach Collins, $5 million. You know what I mean? Like, that's the position we've been in. So that's why I like that Ariza trade, because it gave us one contract, but we need more than that in order to be able to discuss like Gordon Hayward and whatnot. When
this is what drives me crazy about people who say we just need to trade the pick for a veteran because like we don't need draft picks, we need like someone that can help the team now or whatever. And like, so okay, but you can't really trade the 16th pick for anyone making, could we have our trade exception, but anyone making 7.1 million or more, we can't even trade our 16th pick for. So I mean, I know you like the Bielitsa trade, which is fine, but like other than that, there isn't a lot of good options to just trade the 16th pick for. But if you just did what you said and traded Whiteside for Otto Porter Jr., then you're talking about like you could do Otto Porter Jr. and the first round pick for Blake Griffin and take a huge risk. You could trade Otto Porter Jr. and picks for Gordon Hayward if you wanted to do Gordon Hayward. Like you said, Aldridge in the 16th pick. Then like a lot of options become available. Like you could give picks and get Derrick Rose and Snell or something and like work out a trade that way. But like there would be so many options you could use that pick to trade with. But right now it's just like the 16th pick and Ariza, and most of the guys in that range I don't really like better than Ariza on this roster.
Yeah.
And then you're giving up the 16th pick too, so I just don't like how it set us up by not trading him. I understand they wanted to win and they were worried what Dame would think and all that stuff, but yeah,
the better example would have been like Tony Snell, who had 2 years, 12 million a year left, and an expiring. But then, you know, the expiring would have expired. I don't know a player off the top of my head. But then you would have had Tony Snell's contract going into this offseason with 1 year left on it, 12 million. So then you can talk about, a first-round pick, Ariza and Tony Snell for potentially a Gordon Hayward. You have to throw in a little bit more salary, but, you know, then the ideas become like actually feasible and realistic because you have Tony Snell's contract that is worth like $12 million. So you can, you know, actually match salary for a guy making upwards of $30 million a year with a Snell and an Ariza. Because I think, let me look at what Tony Snell makes. Out of curiosity.
I think it's 12.5 next year. I want to say somewhere in the 12 to 12.5 range.
I got it right here. Tony Snell next season is making $12.2 million. All right. So him plus Ariza is $25 million of outgoing salary. That can match. Let me do the math here. I'll put the calculator up on the screen. So that's roughly $25 million of outgoing salary. That means if we trade those two out, we can bring back $31.35 million. Right? So that's the thing. It opens up a lot more. That's the thing. We only have to attach Snell and Ariza, and we can talk about any player making up to $31.3 million. So then the talk becomes a lot more flexible in terms of like, okay, yeah, our first round pick and Snell and Ariza for, you know, we could, if they really don't want to pay Otto Porter Jr., you might be able to talk about Snell and Ariza for Otto Porter Jr. this year. You know, some people wouldn't take that risk, but just there's so many things available that aren't available right now.
And then the other important thing to that is getting players' bird rights. So we'd have Otto Porter Jr.'s bird rights. We'd have Gordon Hayward's bird rights. We'd have, Blake Griffin's bird rights, whatever. Aldridge bird rights. So instead of the following summer, you used our whole mid-level exception on bringing Aldridge back, you could re-sign him to a cheaper deal and use your mid-level exception to add another player, and then you could, you know, have the contracts to make another trade that season and all that stuff. But yeah, it's just frustrating how keeping one player makes this all, and then if he leaves for nothing, then like we just wasted the potential of doing any of this stuff.
Yeah. I'm doing more math here. Give me a sec. you would be. Let me see here. You would almost. You'd barely be short. If you did Anthony Simons, Tony Snell, and Trevor Ariza for Gordon Hayward, you'd barely be short, actually, by 100,000. But like that's the thing is like you wouldn't have to include a Rodney Hood in that type of trade. You could do Collins, you could do Collins, Snell, and Ariza, and you wouldn't have to include a Hood, or you could do Hood and you wouldn't have to include a Collins. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have to throw in so many pieces that we actually need and kill our depth in order to go and get a guy like that.
Are you looking at contracts for next year or this year? Because
next year.
Okay, because if Gordon Hayward agreed to opt in, and we made the trade, this is what happened with Chris Paul in Houston when he came from the Clippers. So Chris Paul was about to like opt out, but then they worked out a trade and had him opt in. So then they made the trade official before the new calendar year. So his contract was only for Gordon Hayward, I believe it's like $32 million instead of 34.7 or whatever it is going up to next year. So you might could probably make it work before the new league year starts, but have him under contract for next year.
Yeah, I mean, like regardless, basically is keeping Whiteside killed our flexibility in terms of trades this offseason. By not trading him for a guy that was under contract this offseason, that we could then use that contract to match salary in trades, it hurt our flexibility, which I was explaining that last year, and people couldn't wrap their heads around it. I was saying trading our $27 million expiring contract of Hassan Whiteside for a 2-year, $27 million per year contract actually improves our flexibility offseason. People are like, how do you trade a guy who's going to be a free agent for a guy making $27 million going into next offseason? How does that help your flexibility when you're adding so much salary? But like that salary would be useful in trades and open up a lot more options. So that's the thing. A lot of people didn't understand that, but I was saying that like a year ago. I was saying that all season long. I was saying that I think we brought that up on our remember our trade marathon podcast that we had in like end of September or start of October, over a year ago, before the season even started. We brought that up. Mm-hmm. So we've been on this for a while, and now we're like in the position where like, oh, now we got to deal with it.
Honestly, I would have been fine trading Whiteside for Nicholas Batum, and I didn't want Batum back, and his contract is one of the worst in the league. But at least then we'd have a $25 million contract to trade this summer.
Yeah, and at that point, yeah. I mean, at that point, the problem is with the luxury tax and whatnot. That's the only problem with that. That's why I would have preferred to get like like a Tony Snell contract and another expiring for Whiteside.
Well, you could have done like Cody Zeller and like MKG or Biyombo or any number. They had so many expiring contracts last year. Like it was,
and I bet you people were like, "Oh, how do you know that's available?" There was like, Memphis got back Dion Waiters and like another expiring that they didn't care about. I think it was Solomon Hill, right?
No, they had Solomon Hill and traded him as part of that trade.
I forget what the trade was, but they basically got back Dion Waiters in a trade who had 2 years, like $12 million per year left on his contract, and they straight up cut Dion Waiters even though they owed him money for this year too. And they had like another expiring for a player, Gorgie Jang, who they like at that point were barely using. I can all but guarantee if we went and said, "Hey, do you want Hassan Whiteside for Dion Waiters and Gorgie Jang or something like that?" They would have said yes, because they straight up cut Dion Waiters. You know, they would rather have an expiring where they wouldn't have to cut salary that they owe a guy next year. So I don't know, like we could have definitely traded him for a contract that could have made things more flexible this offseason, but we didn't.
Yeah, well, because I'm sure Miami would have liked to not have to pay Solomon Hill or like I mean, I know he ended up playing a few minutes, but like they didn't want him either. So like you could have worked out something there where Solomon Hill and either Waiters or Gorgie Jang went to us and Whiteside went to Memphis, and they could have done something because then Memphis would have had more cap space this summer too. And
yeah. So I mean, it's like complicated, but basically we're just in a position where a lot of trades aren't realistic. So all the stuff about like guys making around $30 million a year, don't take it seriously because it's really not realistic with us in the position we're in. That's what I gotta say to you, because this started off talking about Scoop B and his like kind of BS leaks. I just want to set you guys up where you guys know what might be legitimate heading into the offseason based on what's reported. The stuff about Gordon Hayward, and there's so many people talking Gordon Hayward right now, it's not a realistic option, right? Players in that salary range, 30 million plus, are not realistic options this offseason.
Well, here's the other thing, too, with the, real quick, going back to the, well, you don't know if that's available. Mm-hmm. So the Charlotte Hornets waived Marvin Williams and MKG, and those two together made a little more than Whiteside. So if we would have said, hey, if you're about to waive those guys, we'll trade you Whiteside for these two. And
weren't they both expiring contracts?
I'm just saying
that
like,
wouldn't have helped us this offseason.
I'm just saying, like, if we wanted to have a part of like a contract, then we could have gotten another team to say, hey, Tony Snell, like, he has a year left. Do you want to pay him $12.5 million next year, or do you want MKG, who's an expiring, to like the Detroit Pistons or whatever, and then like worked out a deal there, and then as part of that trade, have another option. And you can't tell me that those guys weren't available because they got cut by those teams, and they would have had to pay him less money, a Whiteside, to buy him out than they would have paid to those guys. So
let me try. Basically, we could have probably done Whiteside for a $15 million expiring of Marvin Williams and like a $12 million expiring of MKG. And then we could have taken that $12 million expiring of MKG and gone to Memphis and say, hey, instead of cutting Dion Waiters, who you have to pay money next year, even if you cut him, why don't you take an expiring where you won't have to owe anybody money next year? And we could have swapped the $12 million expiring of MKG for Dion Waiters and then had that Dion Waiters contract this offseason, which would be $12 million in salary that we could use to match trades. So that's the thing. It's just like, we were really mad at Olshey because he didn't set us up for trade flexibility this offseason. Now we're in a position where it's like, we're basically telling people that, like, no, this isn't a realistic option. No, this is not a realistic option. And that's basically the position we're in. And we're trying to, like, help people realize that, like, Gordon Hayward is not a realistic option. So please don't eviscerate Olshey when Gordon Hayward doesn't get traded from Boston to anywhere. Because I feel like that's just how this is going to go. And people are just going to kill Olshey, you know what I mean? That's why all my ideas is like, okay, let's go get Bielitsa with the traded player exception, and then let's use the mid-level exception to sign a good backup center. And then you have people
being like, oh, that's not sexy. Like, God, I'm glad you're not the GM because that's a terrible move.
But
it's like, bro, we're only trying to be realistic.
If we like signed like a Serge Ibaka with the mid-level exception, which is like kind of an unrealistic target, you can throw in Derek Favors as a more realistic backup center. But bro, if we could like go and use the trade player exception, trade a couple second-round picks for Bielitsa, and then we could get Serge Ibaka with the mid-level exception and Derek Favors. Our bench would be phenomenal. Our bench lineup, we'd run CJ with it, and we'd have Trent, Hood, Bielitsa, and like Ibaka or Favors. That bench would be a top 3 bench in the league. When have we ever had a top 10 bench in the league behind Dame? You know what I mean? Maybe there's like a year I'm forgetting, but we've never had a bench that good. We've never had a bench unit where it's like Dame comes out of the game, it's like, oh, we can build this lead because now the benches are in and our bench is phenomenal. You know what I mean? That's 2 simple moves. That's only adding 2 players, right? That's adding a backup center who would embrace that role far more than Whiteside would, and that's adding a backup power forward that's better than Melo and would embrace that role far more than Melo would. You know, a Bielitsa and a Favors or Bielitsa and a Ibaka, right? So that's the thing. Like that offseason, I'd be thrilled with because we'd be good. That team would be good, right? You have Ariza, you have Collins, you have Nurkic as the start in 3-4-5 next to Dame and CJ, and then the bench unit would be the best bench unit ever. I think that would be the most talented roster Dame has ever had, and that's just 2 simple moves. But we also wouldn't use any of our like future first round picks to make that happen. We might be able to keep our 16th pick to make that happen and not have to trade any of our young players, which, you know what? Then we'd be in a position at the trade deadline next year where, we already have a really good team, but then we'd have Bielitsa's $7 million expiring contract along with Ariza's $12.8 million expiring contract, along with, if we use the mid-level exception on like Favors and it's only like a 1-year contract or a team year second option, he would basically be a $9 million expiring contract. We'd have the contracts to match salary. We'd have all our future picks, and we could position ourselves for a splash move at the deadline next season where it might be more likely that more star players get traded at the deadline next season than they do this offseason. And that's, even if we don't make a splash move, I'd be pretty confident because we'd have the best roster Dame has ever had with just adding a Bielitsa and a Favors or a Ibaka. So That's what I'm looking at.
You also have the 2017 draft where some teams are going to have to decide whether they want to pay someone. I'm not saying this guy would be good for us, but there's rumors that Atlanta doesn't want to pay a John Collins or something like that. So you could get involved in like a trade for one of those guys who doesn't sign an extension and they don't want to pay him. So there's those options as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the type of offseason I want.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think it's about time to wrap up the stream. This has been a good stream. Sorry for the little lag.
Except for the hiccup, yeah.
You know, I think that first 20 minutes is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. But you know, setting you guys up for the off season, which we will have you covered over here. So nothing really to plug. I might announce things on Twitter if like something happens in the next like few days. But yeah, we'll be live again on Monday around 9 p.m. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can get so you can know when we go live. Turn notifications on if you want a notification when we go live over here on this channel. And other than that, if you want to play Among Us, we're about to go play Among Us. Join our Discord for that. We have a lot of people in there that don't play. I don't really understand that. If you're one of those, I don't really understand why you're in the Discord if you don't want to play, because it's just to play Among Us. But there is the Discord link if you want to come hang out in voice chat, talk with us, talk with some other members of the community, and play some Among Us. So that's what we're about to go do. And that's a wrap for the stream. Anything you have left to say, Eric?
Nope.
All right.
Always enjoy talking basketball with you guys. Thank you so much for watching.
Yep. Thank you guys. We'll catch you guys later. Hope you guys have a good weekend. As always, peace out. Go Blazers.